Well, welcome back to the loft here at Weir Yard, and we're going to continue the epic tour of my steam locomotive collection. So thanks again for joining me. Let's step on into the collection and see what I've got. Well, we're getting through these at a fair old rate. Now, as I said before, I can never remember the difference between the 3F and the 4F. This is one or the other. But in the Bachmann Collectors Club special release is number 58 in Somerset and Dorset Joint Railway Prussian Blue. This is another of the highly desirable versions that have been produced over the years, sold out very, very quickly, but I was very lucky to be able to get one as I was a member of the club at the time when this appeared. Next to her, this is another Collectors Club locomotive. As you can see in my collection, I've bought quite a few of their offerings over the years. They've really kind of managed to tickle my fancy on so many occasions. And this is the C-Class in the Wartime Austerity Grey liveries, number 689. And it's interesting, actually, that between Bachmann and also Hatton's with their P-Class, there's quite a lot of these SECR Austerity Grey locomotives actually appeared on the market. So we've got a C-Class, an N-Class, and a P-Class at the very least. So pretty good going. Next to her, another C-Class, but in the South Eastern and Chatham Railway, slightly simplified lined green. As number 271, she came out as a follow-up to the highly successful fully lined out C-Class that sold out very, very quickly, but didn't sell quite as well, and they stuck around in the shops for quite some time. Next to her, we've got my one and only V2. This is number 4771, Green Arrow, in the LNER Doncaster Apple Green. And this is the later chassis where Bachmann kind of warmed this model over. So it got a DCC ready chassis, but there were a lot of complaints that people had been expecting a fully retooled model, but instead it was kind of a half and half creation. So a lot of these ended up being sold off quite cheaply. And that was when I picked this up from Ian Allen's, I think it was, in Manchester before they shut down. And actually it does perform quite well. I think a lot of people were very critical on the model, but you know, it fits quite well into my collection. My only gripe is it's got the earlier style tender drawbar that I don't like. But apart from that, she's a pretty good model and is in my to-do pile for getting a DCC chip. Next up, we've got a Midland compound here in the really nice Midland maroon as number 1000. Again, this was a collaboration between Bachmann and the National Railway Museum, but nowhere near as successful in sales as either Butler Henderson or City of Truro, it seems, which is a shame because this particular liveried locomotive has really grown on me, and she is a beautiful, beautiful locomotive in this livery. Did subsequently enter the main range and appeared in both BR and LMS liveries. Next to her is probably one of the most desirable locomotives in my entire collection. It's number 592, Bachmann C-Class, but in the as-preserved, fully lined out and ornate SECR livery. It was produced for what was actually a very comparatively cheap price in the day. This was bought brand new for only about, I think it was 59 or 69 pounds. They were certainly a lot cheaper back then. And there were rumours that Bachmann didn't make any money off them, such was the extra expense of the ornate livery. I did subsequently find out that part of the reason for the scarcity was actually that only around 300 were made. So it was a very low production run, much lower indeed even than some of the special commission models for other outlets. Next to her, the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway E4 tank. And this from Bachmann is actually one of my favourite locomotives. I think it is a truly superb locomotive. So in a way it's a shame it doesn't appear to have sold as well as perhaps it deserves to. In this livery is number 579. She stuck around on the shelves for quite a while. I think she is sold out now, But either they produced far too many, as in probably into the thousands, or she just, for whatever reason, this pretty livery did not capture imagination. There was also a collector's club version as Birch Grove, I believe, in a similar LBSC livery, but with Birch Grove spelt out on the tanks. I don't have that, but this particular one, I do love it. Quite tricky to DCC chip. It's actually a 6-pin chip that this locomotive takes, and you have to be very careful how you squeeze the chip in, it must be said. But I got that done, and she does work really, really well. Next to her, I've got my Robinson 04, which you might recognise, exactly the same as that 8K in the Great Central Railway livery, except this is in the livery right towards the end of its career. And this, I believe, was a special commission by Hatton's. So this is a local to them locomotive, or at least would have been. And it's factory weathered. And I got this when I'm still to this day convinced they made a mistake. For a very limited period, maybe about a week, they discounted it down to about £70 from the RRP of around £149. I bought it thinking, just having a clear out. And then the price went up to about 120, 130. So I think they accidentally mispriced it. Although credit to them, they did honour that order. And that's how I've got hold of her. She has been sound fitted with a Hornby TTS chip in the tender, as has actually the C-Class. I've sound fitted her as well. Again, using a similar sounding Hornby TTS chip. Basically, I pick a Southern locomotive for the right whistle noise and try and match the number of cylinders. And nobody's complained as yet, so I think, to my ears, it actually kind of works. Well, I told you that I liked my A4s, so we've now got to that part of the shelf where we've started to run into a few more of those Hornby super detailed A4s, and it gives me an opportunity actually between these ones to show just how much attention to detail Hornby has made over the years to their flagship model. And these are available double and single chimney. Also, different tenders were available, corridor and non-corridor. And indeed, they were also available in their earlier liveries with the full valances as well. So Hornby really did pull out all the stops on these models. And even though these are the slightly earlier design, I must get one of the up-to-date ones so I can do a what's the difference old versus new. These really do hold their own. This is number 60031, Golden Plover. Again, second hand. I don't think any of these have been bought brand new. They are a plentiful model second hand. We've got 60020 Guillemot, and this is with the single exhaust up there. And she's also got the non-corridor tender. So there's the variation getting in there. And a final variant, we have got, what is it? We've got Kingfisher. 4483 with the full valances in the Blue Streak livery, and this is a particular favourite of mine. They just really do suit these different liveries. So it's I think this was part of a set that I bought second hand. Hornby does a lot of these where you got a locomotive and 3 or 4 coaches, and this was no exception. I can't remember the name of this particular set, but it was certainly a pretty good one. All 3 of these are DCC fitted. They have an 8-pin socket in the locomotive itself, straight underneath the chimney, but I could not get a sound chip to fit in there. Hornby do a TTS A4 sound chip, but it is very much, I think, intended for the retooled version of these models. So I'm going to look out for the retooled version and try and get myself one, because I really do want to do and what's the difference comparison between the newest model and these, because in my opinion these really are something special. This is my GWR King locomotive, again the most up-to-date Hornby super detail model. I got this as part of a set. I bought it brand new, but it was in the, I think it was, may have been from Rails. They were doing it discounted. The locomotive plus 3 coaches, and they were the proper up-to-date, really nice collet coaches, and I think it all came to less than what the locomotive was retailing for separately, albeit with a different running number and identity. So we've got the GWR shirt button logo, which is actually one that's a bit of a rarity in my collection. And that places it, I believe, is this immediately post Second World War or immediately pre? I'm sure somebody will tell me. The identity is King Charles II, number 6009, and this locomotive is fitted with a Hornby TTS King sound chip, which fitted perfectly. And I really do think that the Hornby TTS sound chips offer amazing value for money. You can always tell the King apart from other classes by this very interesting and unique pony truck at the front, where it's sort of outside framed at the front, but inside framed at the back. Next to her, we've got the LNER Q6, the Raven Q6. This is a Hornby model again, and Hornby really do make some exquisite steam locomotives. As the identity of 3418, it could be said to be quite a bland black livery, but I do love this 080 heavy freight locomotive with its utilitarian, business-like appearance, and she is a faultless runner. Next to her is, well, what the LMS had to undertake a similar role. The 080 ex-London and North Western Railway Bowen G2A class locomotive. This one, I do love it again, and it has been fitted with a Hornby TTS chip in the tender, so this too is a sound-fitted loco at a budget price, but she is again a faultless runner and one of the favourites of my fleet. 49395 is actually the identity of the sole surviving G2A at the National Railway Museum. So actually at some point I must tot up all the locomotives that I've got where the prototypes still exist. My next selection of models, this is the Southern Schools class in the olive green, number 903. This is again another Hornby super detail model, and has all the fittings in the tender for a sound chip, and I have fitted her with a sound chip, again a Hornby TTS chip, although it is a glaring omission from their range that they haven't produced a specific Schools TTS chip, but I think I used the S15 chip in it, and actually again nobody's really said, oh, that sounds wrong. So just looking close there, is that Charterhouse? It's quite hard to read that actually to my eyes, but yes, it's Charterhouse. And again, it's a really good performer, and the Schools class has always been one of the flagship Hornby locomotives, and they've continued to update these models to make sure that they remain at the cutting edge of what can be done in model form. Next to her is the Bachmann London and North Western Railway coal tank, but in the later, well actually the early BR livery, number 58900, BR Early Crest. This is actually a surprisingly good locomotive. I didn't buy her when she came out at the time because she seemed very expensive, it has to be said, but there was a bit of a sale going on at Arcadia for this particular liveried model, so I bought myself one. And it's actually my first ever Next 18 decoder model. Now, I had been wondering what on earth a Next 18 decoder was, but this locomotive answered that. And I think the best way I can describe it is it's not unlike fitting a SIM card to a phone. Next to her is one of my personal favourite locomotives, and this really did show that Hornby was raising the bar. It's the Southeastern and Chatham Railway H-class, the Wainwright H-class, but you can see compared to the Bachmann C-class that came out a few years previously, they've upped the game on the detail on this, the real fine slenderness of that lining, but also that dome. It's actually shiny like it's made of metal. This is a beautiful, beautiful locomotive, very easy to DCC fit. Not tried it with sound. I think that would be an awful lot more work, but certainly this is one of the favourites of my collection. Next to her, well, this is the updated Hornby Southeastern and Chatham Railway Terrier. I do have the previous tooling version of this, and it featured in the old versus new What's the Difference video I did a little while ago. But this is a really nice model, and I was really pleased that Hornby sent me one of these to do that review. Next to her, we've got a Great Western 72XX, another Hornby model. Hornby really have been cranking out some really good models. And it's nice to see that they visited some of the more unusual locomotives that hadn't previously ever appeared in model form. And the 72XX, the really large Mikado tank 282, very unusual wheel arrangement. These were a rebuild from, I believe, 42XX and 52XX 280 locomotives in order to extend their range with larger coal and water capacity. But I really do love this model and this livery, and I'm really pleased to have it in my collection. Haven't tried sound fitting, but she is certainly DCC fitted, and that was again quite an easy proposition. Next three up, I've got my Spam can in my Southern Malachite green livery. And these are a very unusual looking locomotive, very boxy, but that gives them a kind of austerity aesthetic, which I actually quite like. So I got this at a knockdown price. I think it was about £100 for the locomotive plus 3 Pullman coaches in one of Hornby's excellent full train sets. It's a bit hard to say actually train set, but they do a box with a locomotive, several coaches, as I've alluded to before, and these can form a very good value for money way of getting an appropriate train together. So I bought it new old stock for a really good price. Really weird numbering system that they had for a period on the Southern. 21C159 almost alludes to continental practice, and I think it's something to do with wheel arrangement and power classification, but I could be wrong on that. She is DCC fitted but not sound fitted because she's the slightly earlier style model which doesn't have room for a speaker in the tender. Next to her is my Bachmann A1 Aberdonian. This was an earlier release. She is DCC fitted, but as an 8-pin socket in the locomotive, so no real opportunity to fit sound. Nonetheless, it's a really good hefty locomotive, and I particularly like the tender with all that rivet detail. It's got a good heft to it. The Cartosi trailing truck there, though, is a bit of a devil to get on the track, but once she's on, she tends to stay on. And next to her, I've got a GWR Saint class, and I've got this fitted with the Hornby TTS Castle chip, and I thought I was being quite clever actually with that, because the Saints were rebuilt into castles, or at least some of them were, so it should sound roughly the same. Faultless run-up. She was bought second-hand from Arcadia Models for a really good price, but mint in box, so really pleased with this. And it wasn't a locomotive that was on my radar, but actually once I got this, I have to say that I would have been kicking myself if I'd have never found one of these and then found later on down the line about them, because this is an exceptionally exquisite Hornby model. And I just didn't really know that they did it, but it's certainly well worth having in your collection. Now, I love these next three locomotives. This particular one here, 46203, is a Princess Royal LMS locomotive here in the livery of Princess Margaret Rose. This isn't the bang-up-to-date one. This is, in fact, probably about 2 iterations behind the current one. Again, another flagship locomotive in the Hornby range, and they've striven to keep it bang up to date. So this has the fatter goalpost type couplings at the back. But nonetheless, I think this model really does hold its own. And even next to, in my case, I've got the Princess Coronation classes, I've got the bang up to date one. I think it really does still look the part. It is DCC ready, but with an 8-pin socket in the locomotive rather than the tender, so proved too difficult to chip this with a sound chip, but it is DCC standard fitted. This you may recognise from the What's the Difference, old versus new. This is the older model of the Princess Coronation class in the guise of Duchess of Abercorn. Fitted with the TTS Princess Coronation sound chip in the tender. Works really, really well. And as you remember from that video, it was actually quite subtle, the differences between it and the slightly newer version of Duchess of Montrose, visible here, with the variations actually were there. When you looked for them, they were there and noticeable, but it really was a subtle improvement. But some of those, for example, the front pickup trunk was really actually inspired in the way it was done, and the coal load too. So there's a couple of the improvements between that and the old one. So I'm actually really looking forward to at some point having the opportunity to get a bang up to date version of the Princess Royal class and being able to do an old versus new comparison with this venerable model. Wow, does anybody get the idea that I've just got quite a lot of locomotives? We're still getting through them, but there's still quite a few to go. This is one of the new Hornby J50s, and I do really like this model. It's got a rugged presence about it, which really does mark a massive improvement for me over the old Lima J50, which really just bears no comparison. I've got quite a few of these from the first production run and the second production run, which is where this comes from. It's number 14, departmental locomotive in the BR Lakecrest livery. Bit of an unusual identity, but it's nonetheless one which I managed to pick up. So really pleased to have it in my collection. Easy to chip, 8-pin socket in there, fitted with a Hornby chip, and works faultlessly. This here is actually a special commission of the Bachmann Ginty, and this was done for Transport Models in Preston. And actually it's probably an exercise in what not to do commercially, because they had a great deal of difficulty, it seemed, in selling through these. 47472 in BR Lakecrest, slightly weathered. The prototype locomotive was for a while the station pilot at Preston Station, and that's the reason that they commissioned it. But unfortunately, there was nothing really unique about the locomotive to really give it that USP, and it did hang around on their shelves for quite some time. So, you know, it's if the livery is just a mundane livery like this, doesn't stand out, then what is there that's special about a loco to warrant a special commission? But it has sold out now, so I guess they did make their money back eventually. But I picked this one up second-hand, ironically from Transport Models, but it's a good performer, and it is fully DCC ready, so did get that chipped. This, again, is one of the locomotives that I really do like from the Hornby stable. This is Gilwell Park. I believe she's a B17. And I love that short tender. I was told that was so that she fitted onto the turntables within the area where she worked, which is why she's got this dinky little 6-wheeled tender. But she's a faultless performer, and I have fitted her with a Hornby TTS sound chip. Next to her, we're back to the mark of Bachmann, and this is a 30XX280. It's actually a Robinson 8K, but with a little bit of Swindonisation. But this is her in her BR livery, weathered, and it had probably been very run down by this point, so the weathering is quite apt. But again, bought this in the sale from Hatton's and don't regret it. They are a beautiful performing locomotive from Bachmann, and I think it's probably one of the classes of locos that I just won't be able to stop myself when I find them second-hand at a good price. I can just feel it that I'm going to be picking up more and more of these, the Robinson 8K and the LNER 04. In fact, I've got my eye on the London and North Western Railway liveried one that Bachmann has just recently brought out. The LBSC Brighton Atlantic in the burnt umber livery. This is such a beautiful locomotive. It's a Bachmann model, and I'll be honest with you, it's one of the few models that, having seen pictures of it appear online, I rang up Tim at Arcadia Models, paid for it over the phone, and then later that day, driving past, just sort of ran in and picked this up, and I do not regret it. This is one of the finest locomotives, in my opinion, in the whole of the Bachmann range. I just love this, and this livery application made it a must for my fleet. Next to her, another Bachmann model, this time the Ivet 2MT, 260 and tender, one of the, I think she was actually an LMS locomotive, but right at the end of LMS before nationalisation, so probably more associated with the BR period, even though it's an LMS designed loco. Next to her, we've got the Robinson 9J, I think she is, more probably better known as the LNER J11. In the Great Central Railway livery, this was a Collectors Club special, again another popular one, sold out quickly, and I really did have to have this. So, hey presto, here it is. Next to her, this is the Hornby North British J36. And in the North British livery, this was one that was supplied factory fitted with the TTS chip, but that was then later subsequently released separately. Got the name Maud on there. She is a beautiful loco, and my first ever North British liveried locomotive, although Oxford Rail did produce a single lowly 4-plank wagon in an appropriate livery. So I have a locomotive and a single wagon that's livery appropriate. This is the Hornby Drummond 700 class, which you may remember from a recent video where I declared it the best value for money of any locomotive currently on the market. And this was because Hattons were selling it for around, I think it was £59, which for a model of this quality was unbelievable value. Next to her, we've got a Bachmann Ginty, but this is in an industrial livery, quite an unusual one. GW Pepper Coal Concentration Yard, I think, which was somewhere near, struggling with the depths of my memory, I think Wakefield. But it's basically, she's had her tanks, side tanks and the bunker at the back painted orange. And that's about it, really. But it's just an unusual livery, and I really do like my industrial liveries. So again, along with the 57XX in blue that I showed you before, they were stalwarts of Grove Street Yard until I got some more regionally appropriate locomotives. Now, I said that I had other J50s in my collection. Here's one of them, LNER 585, and next to her we got the rather subtly lined LNER 635, both faultless runners, and I can't recommend the Hornby J50 more highly. It is a great small shunting locomotive for your fleet. Next to her we've got the Bachmann Fairbairn tank as number 42073 in the BR Lakecrest livery. For the similar reasons that I love the Standard Class 4, I do love this class locomotive, and indeed I think the Standard Class 4 was very much an iteration of this design. So the two of them go together and complement each other pretty well. But I do love there's something about the aesthetics, the presence of both those locomotives that I really do like. Next up, we've got my Hornby Q1. This is actually from back in the day. I must have had this probably since they first came out back in about maybe 2002, something like that. Number 33006, BR Lakecrest, factory weathered. I've always loved this. There's something about the aesthetics of this ugly duckling that I've just always loved. And I'm quite surprised in a way that I only have one in my collection. Certainly wouldn't mind picking up a few more. I do have a soft spot for this locomotive with its box-pox wheels and its very strange design. Easy enough to DCC fit, although it's an 8-pin socket in the locomotive itself, so no real opportunity for sound fitting. I'd be interested to see whether the newer releases of this have actually taken on board the ability to have speaker and sound chip fitted in the tender. Must look out for that. Next to her, we're going back to the mark of Bachmann, and this is the little Midland 1F, which is a lot like the Ginty in my opinion, but it is a completely different locomotive design with that half cab on there. This has been detailed with a little bit of weathering and a crew being put in there. She was bought second hand. She's chipped with, these take a 6-pin decoder and are actually, it's quite a tight fit, so you do have to be careful in your choice of brand of decoder. But a lovely little locomotive, and in a way it's a shame really that I don't see more of these about because they are a good model. Next to her we've got, I can't remember the type of locomotive. I'm going to go out on a limb and say 55XX, or is it, no, actually no, I think it's 45XX. This is a 262 Prairie tank, but this particular one, again, another early Bachmann Collectors Club offering. And I actually didn't buy this through the club. I bought it brand new, but from Hatton Model Centre. For whatever reason, I think sometimes at the end of a distribution run of some of these models, the club sends a few out to loyal model shops to dispose of. So he still had it in his cabinet at the original price of, I think it was around £60, something like that. Brand new in box, never been used. And I just had to snap that up. It is a beautiful locomotive. I do remember her being out at the time. just never got round to getting one. You know, finance is probably a little bit tight, and also your interests change over the years, and now I think, you know, the aesthetics of this loco are beautiful. This particular one was not DCC ready, but as I showed you in the how to DCC chip non-DCC ready locomotives, this is one of those two locomotives that was in that video. Very easy to do. Next to her is 1863, the N-class, but in the southern Monsal green. And this is the other half of that special set with the SECR grey liveried one that I told you about. Following on behind her is the M7, again another stalwart of the Hornby fleet, in London and South Western Railway P green as number 245. This was done in conjunction with the National Railway Museum a good number of years ago, but I do believe that certainly I have still seen them on sale brand new in the shops, and if this is a livery that really tickles your fancy, I do know that Tim at Arcadia in Shaw still has these brand new in stock, so swing on by there to pick it up and tell him I sent you. Well, we're nearly there. Do excuse the sound of the rain outside. It's got really bad weather at the moment, but this particular locomotive is a 240 BT well tank. It was commissioned by Kernow Model Centre. It's one of their own models made for them by Dapol, and it's actually a really, really well-designed loco. It's got that beauty and charm about it. But the best area of this, and it's one actually I really want to do a video on chipping it, because I'm just so impressed with the thought that's gone into this design. The smokebox door is held on by a pair of magnets, and inside you'll find on the end of some flexible wires a socket that you can pull out, take the blank off, fit the chip, push it back in. No need to take the body off this in order to chip it, and that is the kind of really great thought of design really I wish we'd see a lot more of from other manufacturers. Next to her is the Bachmann, is this the 4F or the 3F? Again, I can't tell the difference, you know. So people are probably screaming at their screens which one it is. I'm going to go out on a limb and say 3F? Nah, 4F. But this is what was produced in the main range in the Midland Railway black livery as number 3848. Again, it didn't seem to sell particularly well, which I thought was a great shame, because this particular livery is really, in my books, really, really nice. And we've got the crest there on the cab sides, which really does bring out this livery with some interest. But we've also got the Midland Railway liveried guards van that they did to go with this. So you can actually make up an authentic freight train with the brake van, this locomotive, and some of the other wagons from various manufacturers that are time period correct for this locomotive. So it's a great shame that it didn't sell in bigger numbers. Next to her is a locomotive that I've always had a soft spot for. This is the Hornby L1, but this is from the first batch that suffers from the rather weird design of front pony truck, which means that running forwards she doesn't do too well unless she's being double-headed with another locomotive in front. But at this livery in the LNER apple green, but with British Railways written on her sides, it's actually, it just makes it a little bit different. And when I saw this, I just fell in love with this. Bought from Model Zone in Manchester, long before that chain sadly went into administration. I do like this model. It shares a similar presence with the 4MT264 tank, and indeed also the Fairbairn tank, but it's just something a little bit different. It's not a model that appears particularly frequently in the Hornby range, but it does appear from time to time, and it is a well-designed model, apart from that front pickup truck, which I do believe that Hornby did resolve with later releases of the model. What else have we got in here? A Bachmann J72, just trying to focus on that. It's a bit tricky because of the reflections in the glass. That's the earlier split chassis model, which you can tell by looking in the cab. So it's been relegated to a display cabinet quite simply because she'll never get DCC fitted. She's not a great runner on DC, and that is just a hiding to nothing. And I'm really looking forward to the new Bachmann model to see just how much of a quantum leap that will make. Over on the other side, if you can hear me over the rain, this is my Soul J39, again a very early Bachmann split chassis model. She actually runs really well on DC, but again, Not a model which I'm likely to ever contemplate DCC fitting because of that split chassis. So will be remaining for now as display cabinet fodder. The Southeastern and Chatham Railway Terrier, the older one, and this came out for me as a little bit of a disappointment because those wheels look like kind of soapy plastic. The colour for me was slightly wrong. So there she is. Over here I've got another Ginty 47310, separated from a set that Bachmann released quite a long time ago. So she now lives in this cabinet. She'll need to be hardwired. Next to her, that's an Electro Tren, I think it's a Spanish liveried model perhaps, or French. I got that. I was thinking about doing some kind of industrial locomotive suitable for Trafford Park / Manchester Ship Canal. Never got round to it, so again relegated to the display cabinet. And also A4 Pacifics. This is 60013 Dominion of New Zealand. This is actually a very early Bachmann model. I think she may even be split chassis. Does run okay, but again, no immediate plans to DCC fit her. Final locomotives, throwing a little bit of a curveball here. These are Dapol O-gauge locomotives in my fleet, but a full listing of all my steam locomotives wouldn't be complete without these. So we've got the 57XX Pannier here in the NCB livery. Model Zone did produce a 00 version of this, which I never quite got round to getting, and I keep looking out for it second hand. It is a beautiful model. Next to her, there's another 57XX, but in the BR livery. And moving right up to the top row, that's my London and South Western Railway Dapol Terrier in O-gauge, and a beautiful locomotive. A special bonus footage, here are the Hornby 00 locomotives, which I've got in my display cabinets around the house. Do excuse the reflection of the light. I've got two of the R1s. This is the first one. We've got, I'm just trying to read the running number there. It's very difficult to get it to focus because of the reflections. 31340, and further down 31337 in the BR black livery. One of the few times that Hornby 00 had basically two versions out at the same time. I did consider showing this in the old versus new What's the Difference, the Princess Coronation class. This is City of London, the Hornby 00 model, but I thought that that might just be a little bit silly, but maybe I will revisit that idea later in the future. There's always people who are very interested to know how far we've come in model form. Over here we've got, it's very difficult to show this up in this light because of the glass front to this cabinet, and I really didn't want to take that cabinet front off. So 69550 BR Lake Crest. This was the 2-rail version of the N2 tank. But just up here, this is something of a rarity. 69567, but with the Lake Crest and the coal in the bunker. That makes this the very rare late 3-rail model, and you can just about see the skates underneath. So that's the Hornby 00 models that I've got knocking about the house too. Well, thank you very much for coming on this tour with me. It's been great to have your company, exploring the steam locomotives that I have in my collection and available to run here on Weir Yard. But until next time, you take really good care of yourself. And this is me, Jenny Kirk, saying don't forget to like this video, share it too, let others know about the videos we've got on this channel. And if you're not already done so, subscribe to the channel and ring that bell, and you'll be the first to know about new videos as and when they go up. And also you can head on over to Patreon and check us out, and that is a big help if you wish to support the show, help us make the videos that you want to see. But until next time, you take really good care of yourself. Bye for now. Today's video has been brought to you in part thanks to the generous donation of my fans on Patreon. And an extra special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Michael Churchwood, Bob Threeton, Alec Ralph, Anthony Hunt, William Wade, Wayne Johns, Offshore Allen, and oorail.co.uk. If you'd like to help support the show, head on over to patreon.com/Jennifer Kirk. Thank you. Today's video has been brought to you by my books, Bringing Home the Stars, Twinkle Little Star, and also you can get the complete comic collections of All Over the House, Books 1, Books 2, and also the wacky zany Life of Knobty Mouse. Thanks, and catch you later.